quorum, it looks like. And I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Senator McGarvey, Senator Nemes, Senator Schroeder, Senator Storm, Senator Thomas, Senator Wise, Representative Blanton,
Here.
Representative Fleming, Representative Hatton, Representative Jenkins, Representative Riley,
Here.
Representative Sharp, Vice Chair Howell, Vice Chair Beckler,
Here.
Co-Chair Carroll,
Here.
and Co-Chair Nemes.
Here.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, and I again want to welcome everyone. And this is the second meeting of the Legislative Oversight and Investigation Committee for July the 14th, 2022. You all should have the minutes from the previous meeting in your file, and I would entertain a motion to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Minutes are approved. A couple different items on the agenda today. We're going to start out with a staff report on a topic that is very much pertinent today. Still a lot of issues, and one of the priorities within state government right now continues to be broadband. And staff has researched and gathered information and data for this report. And we have Joel Thomas and Jeremy Skinner who will be presenting. And I understand Shane, where's Shane? Are you going to be presenting also, sir, or are you going to? If you need them. Okay, very good. All right, gentlemen, please introduce yourselves for the record, and you have the floor.
So I'm Joel Thomas, and to my right is Jeremy Skinner. We're both analysts with the Legislative Oversight and Investigations Committee. So at its November 2020 meeting, the committee asked staff to determine the status of broadband in Kentucky and what the state needs to do to move forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by providing some background on broadband, and then discuss our methodology, and finally our findings and recommendations. We'll sort of go through those. Kentucky has been addressing broadband challenges since as early as 2004, when the legislature established a broadband task force to study broadband coverage and the quality of service across the state. In 2006, the legislature created the Broadband Deployment Account within the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority, or otherwise known as KIA, to disperse funds for broadband projects. In 2010, using funding from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, Kentucky created the Office of Broadband Outreach and Development, otherwise known as OBOD. There's going to be a lot of acronyms in this presentation, so we'll try to keep that all straight. So OBOD was established to engage stakeholders and generate mapping data for the National Telecommunications and Information Administration's National Broadband Map. So that's NTIA. In 2015, work began on the Kentucky Wired Middle Mile project following the creation of the Kentucky Communications Network Authority, which is now mostly completed. In 2020, the legislature redefined KIA's Broadband Deployment Account as the Broadband Deployment Fund. In this past session, the legislature created the Office of Broadband Development to be the central broadband development and funding authority in the state. Our review gathered information from federal government organizations, research centers, state governments, local governments, and the broadband industry. Staff also reviewed Kentucky's broadband efforts since 2004 and compared them to best practices identified in other states and by research entities such as the Pew Research Center and the Benton Institute for Broadband. The result provides perspective on both the history and current landscape of broadband development in Kentucky. It also highlights some of the most significant challenges facing state broadband development and how Kentucky can address these challenges moving forward. The Pew Research Center, which has been conducting research into broadband deployment for more than a decade, published a report in 2020 outlining 5 best practices that states can employ to improve broadband development and close the digital divide. These 5 best practices that were identified by Pew include stakeholder outreach and engagement, which entails working with public and private stakeholders at the state and local level, and we address those in Finding Area 1 in the report. Policy framework, which includes setting well-defined goals and clear policy direction in legislation that identifies and addresses barriers to broadband deployment in unserved and underserved areas, and we address this in Finding Area 2. Third, planning and capacity building, which is establishing plans that define goals and objectives that can be used to measure progress while supporting local planning efforts to educate community members, and we address these in Finding Area 3. Funding operations entails providing funding to support broadband deployment in unserved and underserved areas through grant programs. And finally, program evaluation, which is evaluating the performance of planning efforts and funding infrastructure projects to incorporate lessons learned, and we address these in Finding Area 5. Each one of these best practices can be looked at as flowing into one another or dovetailing in and sort of building on the previous one, and working together as one cohesive unit. LOIC staff determined that Kentucky has been active in stakeholder engagement activities since 2004 through efforts such as the Kentucky Broadband Task Force and its collaboration with Connect Kentucky, the 2010 creation of the Office of Broadband Outreach and Development, or OBOD, and the creation of the Kentucky Communications Network Authority in 2015, and its associated wholesaler agreement with Excelicom in 2017. So LOIC staff examined the wholesaler agreement further, the one with Excelicom, and determined that Excelicom has not been providing reports to KCNA. Although revenue sharing for the project is not anticipated until 2032, quarterly reporting describing Excelicom's progress facilitating last-mile broadband deployment during the interim would provide the state with valuable stakeholder input and inform future broadband planning decisions for the office. The report makes the following recommendation regarding Excelicom and the quarterly reporting requirements. So recommendation 3.1 is that KCNA should work with Excelicom to establish formal quarterly reporting to keep the legislature updated on anticipated revenue from the sale of dark and lit fiber pursuant to the wholesaler agreement. So, in addition to this, LOIC staff recently discussed quarterly reporting with Excelicom and were informed that Excelicom and KCNA have agreed upon a reporting format to fulfill that requirement, but the report has not been sent as of this presentation. Further discussion and details of the wholesaler agreement and Kentucky Wired, including visits to 4 Excelicom sites made by LOIC staff and conducted by Excelicom officials in southeastern Kentucky, can be found on pages 36 through 44 of the Broadband Study Report. Since 2004, the Kentucky State Legislature has established a number of important broadband policy frameworks for broadband. This includes House Bill 627, which stated, quote, "The provision of broadband services shall be market-based and not subject to state administrative regulation." What this statute essentially did was removed broadband from being a regulated utility under the jurisdiction of the Public Service Commission. House Bill 550, passed in 2006, created the Broadband Deployment Account, which was a funding mechanism included in KIA's revolving fund, but was used specifically for broadband projects in unserved and underserved areas in Kentucky. Although the provision of broadband services is not subject to state administrative regulation as a utility, statute stated that KIA shall promulgate regulations to guide the functions of the Broadband Deployment Account. LOIC staff determined that KIA amended the Infrastructure Revolving Fund regulation in 2009 to include additional wording related to the Broadband Deployment Account. In 2017, the General Assembly statutorily created KCNA through House Bill 343 to oversee the Kentucky Wired Middle Mile project, Previous to this, in 2015, KCNA was created through an executive order. In 2020, House Bill 362 created the Broadband Deployment Fund, separate of KIA's revolving fund. The legislation also stated that KIA shall promulgate regulations to guide the functions of the fund. KIA filed a regulation which received a significant amount of public comments. According to KIA staff, the agency pulled the regulation because of potential broadband legislation coming from the General Assembly and changing federal guidance specific to broadband funding. In 2021, House Bills 320 and 382 appropriated $300 million to the Broadband Deployment Fund. Finally, the most recent session created the Office of Broadband Development through House Bill 315 to manage the unprecedented level of broadband funding following the COVID-19 pandemic and direct future broadband projects. Within House Bill 315, the Rural Infrastructure Improvement Fund and Program is to be used for pole replacement costs while deploying broadband to unserved areas. The legislation states that the Office of Broadband Development shall promulgate administrative regulations specific to this fund and program. Recommendation 3.2 is that KIA should begin drafting its regulation related to the newly created Rural Infrastructure Fund and Program. In addition, it should consider including regulatory language to address other components of House Bill 315 related to the administration of the Broadband Deployment Fund. Finally, it should revisit the public comments received from its draft regulation, which were the guidelines for the broadband deployment account, as it considers a regulatory framework for broadband deployment moving forward.
Kentucky has been involved in planning and guiding broadband deployment since 2004. This involvement includes the efforts of the Kentucky Broadband Task Force to identify key issues related to broadband expansion, OBOD's broadband infrastructure mapping initiatives, KCNA's Kentucky Wired project planning and oversight, the Kentucky Broadband Working Group's efforts to improve remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the newly established Office of Broadband Development's mandate to incentivize stakeholder collaboration and to develop a statewide broadband plan. The Office of Broadband Development, or OBD, was established in 2022 and will serve as the state's central broadband planning and coordination entity. House Bill 315, which was passed during the 2022 regular session, mandated that the new office develop and implement a state broadband plan, develop and encourage cost-effective broadband, further broadband infrastructure development in unserved and underserved areas, and coordinate and provide consultation to relevant stakeholders. These goals cover many of the national best practices reviewed by legislative oversight staff. Additional best practices include working to translate policy into practice, developing accurate maps of broadband infrastructure, and reviewing the best practices and policy framework of other states. Legislative oversight staff identified some steps that the office can take to follow up on these additional best practices. Our staff identified reports related to broadband planning and funding on the KCNA website. Our report recommends that OBD review the archived KCNA website documents, as they may be useful for OBD with respect to translating policy into practice. The development of accurate mapping is consistently cited as a key component of broadband planning and capacity building. The FCC is currently developing new maps, which are expected to be completed in early 2023. Funding for the BEAD program, which is the Broadband Infrastructure Program in the Infrastructure Act, will be determined by the number of unserved locations in the new maps. As the Broadband Infrastructure Funding Program does include a challenge process that could affect the funding that states receive, it is important that the state have as accurate and complete mapping as possible. As a result, the report recommends that OBD consider additional investment in broadband mapping. Staff also reviewed the statutes guiding other state broadband programs that were identified as promising by the Pew Research Center. The results indicate that states have developed many different successful approaches to developing broadband programs, which can provide valuable insight for Kentucky. Recommendation 3.3 is that the newly created Office of Broadband Development should thoroughly review and use the archived information stored by KCNA as context for developing its planning and outreach program moving forward. Recommendation 3.4 is that OBD should consider additional procurements related to mapping in order to assist with the review of current and future address challenges and other mapping issues. Recommendation 3.5 is that OBD should review broadband development regulations and policies that other states are successfully putting into practice. The statutory language contained in House Bill 315 is inclusive, but reviews of regulations and policies already in practice in other states and their outcomes can help identify areas for improvement and inform Kentucky's statewide broadband plan. Like most states, Kentucky has relied primarily on federal funding to address issues caused by the digital divide. They have done this through broadband programs that are administered by the FCC, the USDA Rural Utility Service, and through NTIA. FCC Universal Service Fund programs such as the E-rate program and the various Connect America funds, which include the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, RDOF, they typically offer subsidies and discounts to telecoms providing service in rural high-cost areas, or in the case of E-rate, to schools and libraries. USDA Rural Utility Service programs such as Reconnect and Community Connect offer grants and loans for broadband infrastructure in rural areas. NTIA, in addition to broadband infrastructure programs such as the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program, they also administered the State Broadband Development Grant Program, which Kentucky used to establish and fund OBOD in 2010. Going forward, NTIA will also it will administer most of the broadband funding included in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The funding for the programs mentioned here has not been historically been state directed. Most of the funding typically flows to telecommunications companies or partnerships between telecom companies and municipalities. It's an effort to incentivize investment in rural high-cost areas where the return on investment is often insufficient to attract private industry. More information regarding these programs and the funding amounts can be found in Chapter 2 of the report. Congress included billions of dollars of appropriations for broadband programs in COVID-19 era spending bills. For example, the CARES Act directed additional funding to the USDA Reconnect program, and it provided flexible funding to states called coronavirus relief funds. Most of this funding was used for immediate emergencies such as unemployment or PPE, but for example, Kentucky used $8 million in CARES funding for K-12 internet connectivity, and it used $60,000 to hire a contractor to lead the statewide broadband mapping initiative. The Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 appropriated nearly $5 billion to FCC and NTIA programs intended to increase access to affordable and reliable high-speed internet access service. These programs included the Emergency Broadband Benefit and the Broadband Infrastructure Program. In addition to significant funding to support remote learning, the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, appropriated billions of dollars in flexible funding to states and local governments. Kentucky received over $2 billion in state fiscal recovery funds and $183 million in coronavirus capital projects funds. Both of these funds include broadband infrastructure as an eligible use. The state has received its share of state fiscal recovery funds, but it is yet to receive the $183 million in capital projects funding, as that funding is contingent upon submission and approval of the state's grant plan. House Bill 315 appropriated a combined $300 million in ARPA funds, $117 million in state fiscal recovery funds, and all $183 million from the Capital Projects Fund. It appropriated that to the KIA Broadband Deployment Fund. Legislative oversight staff verified that a KIA Broadband Deployment Fund has been established in the statewide accounting system. There's currently no money in this fund. As Pew has identified tracking and managing of broadband funds as a best practice from other states' broadband programs, our report recommends that OBD confirm that federal funds appropriated to the Broadband Deployment Fund are being properly tracked. The Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, which was passed in late 2021, included over $60 billion in funding for new and existing broadband programs. That represents the largest federal broadband investment in history. The act includes $42.45 billion for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, or BEAD program, $2.75 billion for digital equity programs, $1 billion for middle mile projects, and $14.2 billion for the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is a continuation of the emergency broadband benefit from the Consolidated Appropriations Act. The act also includes additional funding for existing programs such as Reconnect. As the administrator of the bulk of broadband funding included in the infrastructure bill, including BEAD, the NTIA solicited feedback from the public regarding the Infrastructure Act's broadband programs. Recommendation 3.6 is that OBD should review the questions posed by NTIA during the public comment process for the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, along with the responses that NTIA received. These questions and responses indicate which issues NTIA considers critical, and they can inform the state's decision-making related to upcoming procurement documents. In addition, the questions and responses provide valuable insight into what will be required of states as they seek eligibility for the BEAD program. Recommendation 3.7 is that OBD should ensure that federal money appropriated from the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund and the State Fiscal Recovery Fund is expended and tracked through the KIA Broadband Deployment Fund. Since 2006, state-administered broadband programs in Kentucky have been limited to the KIA Broadband Deployment Account and Fund, the Office of Broadband Outreach and Development, and the Kentucky Wired Project. Kentucky, like many other states, did not actively administer or evaluate broadband deployment activities through a dedicated office until recently. As a result, for the past 2 decades, broadband development has largely been the responsibility of local entities and the private sector. The newly established Office of Broadband Development marks a change in this practice by creating Kentucky's first central broadband coordination agency. As the central broadband authority in the state, the new office will be responsible for fostering relationships with other state, regional, local, and private entities. It will also be charged with developing broadband plans, making recommendations for broadband infrastructure development, and providing consultation services to local units of governments. As OBD moves forward, evaluation of programs and planning efforts in consultation with stakeholders, along with the lessons learned, will be critical to the success of broadband deployment efforts. Therefore, recommendation 3.8 is that OBD should consider developing memoranda of agreement with critical groups in state government related to planning, outreach, and program evaluation, in addition to the expenditure of broadband deployment funds. At a minimum, it should consider creating memoranda of understanding with entities that represent the Kentucky Advisory Group referenced in statute. That concludes our presentation. We'll be happy to take any questions you have.
Any members have questions? Senator Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know who fields which questions, so I'll throw them out there, and then you guys take it however it's supposed to happen. From my understanding purposes, when we talk about a Silicom, I may not be even pronouncing that right. Oh, is that basically what we're talking about with Kentucky Wired? Is that who's going to administer Kentucky Wired?
Yes. Yeah, they are the wholesaler that is responsible for 1/2 of the Kentucky Wired middle mile.
But KCNA is administering Kentucky Wired as a whole.
I'm sorry,
That's
I'm
correct.
having trouble hearing.
Oh, sorry. KCNA is actually administering the Kentucky Wired project. The Silicom is a partner, the wholesale partner.
Right.
So how all of that, I don't know how all that fits together yet still. So we were talking about the KCNA being the basically responsible for overseeing our broadband best practices. That's what I took away from that. Is that correct? If it's not, straighten me out. It's okay.
In some ways, that's true, but in regards to what's going to be happening with the Office of Broadband Development within KIA, they're going to be the responsible authority for best practices. Yeah.
On slide 6, where you talk down at the bottom about keeping the legislature updated on anticipated revenue from the sales of dark and lit fiber pursuant to a wholesaler agreement, that's the Kentucky Wired project, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Yes, so it's the it's the Kentucky Wired project that the part that Excelicom is actually managing for the facilitating last mile deployment and connecting enterprise customers.
So is Excelicom connecting middle mile to last mile? Is that roughly how that part works?
Yes, they're the facilitator. So they're basically taking what we built with the Kentucky Wired project and connecting that to like a third party
Okay.
tier, like a last mile ISP, like an internet service provider in a local.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So in this reporting, have you guys already has it been established what all the reporting is going to be done? You talk about anticipated revenue from this. Is that the only thing you're going to be reporting on? Because I think a lot of us would like to know what is being done as far as providing for actual provision of broadband on the last mile. You know, my people, the ones that even know that Kentucky Wired exists, understand that it was just a bad deal that we're stuck paying all this money for the next 27 years. They don't care about that. What they want is to have internet access and the last mile provisions. They don't care if the state's getting any money back off of it or not. They just want to have high-speed internet. Is there going to be any reporting that you're doing on this for how that's actually getting rolled out?
So there are a couple of representatives from Excelicom that would be much better at articulating that point.
But we are, as a government, as your government entity, you're the one that's responsible for the oversight and reporting, right?
So yes, KCNA would be the entity. Yes, they would be.
So
one
presumably, you're
setting
going to dictate to Excelicom what they report on, correct?
So I would think that KCNA and Excelicom through the wholesaler agreement would establish that type of whatever that reporting.
Yeah, I would
is going to be.
assume so, but maybe this is different. But anytime there's a reporter and a reportee, and anything else I've ever seen in business and life, the reportee gets to dictate what the reporter reports on. And
Senator
the
Howe,
reporter,
It's
Senator Howe,
outlined.
why don't we can get into this more with Director Williams with KIA.
okay, I don't
She
know
could
if
probably
they're the ones to do
yeah,
that or not.
Yeah,
but
these are just staff that.
yeah,
put
but I
together
just
the
didn't.
report.
What I was really trying to get, I got down a rabbit hole. What I'm trying to establish is that going to be more reporting than just a finance? So maybe, I don't know, we can table that and go to.
Yeah, and we'll ask
Okay.
Excelicom
I didn't mean to
come
put you
the
on the spot.
table-
I don't know
table
how
also.
you guys fit into this. So my other questions are more on the tracking and the reporting. Is that better to just wait to the end and then we can bring them back if we need to?
Yes, if they, I mean, what they can testify to is just what they gathered on this report.
Okay.
With the information.
I didn't
So
mean to put you on
some
the
of
spot.
other
I was just trying to
entities
work
can
backwards
best.
off of that. So
Yeah. So we have Director Hicks from the State Budget Office is present, and Executive Director of KIA, Sandy Williams, is also here, and then we have folks from Excelicom
okay.
that can answer
I'll
questions.
table those to them.
and
I
we
didn't mean to
can-
put you on the spot. Y'all were talking about the reporting, and I wanted to go through that part of it. Thank you.
Okay, Representative Beckler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In looking through your presentation, there are about three different places where you say should consider, and other places you're saying what they should do. Does that, what am I to get from that? You think, you say should consider. Does that mean that you really don't know if they should do what you're suggesting they consider or not, or what does it actually mean?
Well, so in our context, there are a variety of, for example, like best practices. There's Pew. There's a variety of entities out there that OBD could go to. So we were suggesting that, Benton or Pew might be a place to start, but we're not saying that Pew or Benton are the exact authorities on this. There's a variety of entities that do spell out best practices. So we were basically saying that those might be areas that they could, or entities that they could look at if they wanted to adopt best practices for the Office of Broadband Development.
So, for example, on slide 8, LOIC recommendation 3.2, you say, in addition, it should consider including additional regulatory language to address other components of House Bill 315, etc. But later on you say it should revisit. I guess, are you saying that they should include additional regulatory language, or are you just suggesting that they look at it and make a decision whether or not they want to do it?
The latter of that, yes, that they should look and then make the decision based on whatever information that they were able to gather from best practices, because in the legislation the language is permissive whether or not they can put forth administrative regulations. They don't have to. So we were saying that, you know, if you go in and look at best practices, it may actually reveal that administrative regulations are necessary.
Okay. Do you know how much money has been spent to date? How much of our Kentucky taxpayer money has been spent to date on broadband deployment, or do I have to ask that to somebody else?
In
Jeremy,
terms of a particular project, such as Kentucky Wired, or just how much taxpayer money has been on broadband in general?
Actually, both, but in general, it'd be my first question.
With Kentucky Wired, I can't give you the exact figure, right? I don't have that in front of me. That could be relatively easy to find because that's paid through things like availability payments that are tracked through the statewide accounting system and through appropriations. As far as broadband in general, what the state has spent, off the top of my head, I don't.
Yeah, that, because a lot of that stuff goes through.
And it depends on if you're talking about broadband deployment, broadband, just connecting agencies to broadband, connecting schools to broadband. It's a very broad subject.
Yeah, and a lot of the funding mechanisms, you know, they go straight to like an ISP, or they go straight to a municipality, or to you know, and so yeah, those types of funds, you know, were, as far as like calculating that,
Yes.
it would be difficult.
Can you get that information or not?
I think we could make a good effort at it.
Yes, we can make an
Yeah.
effort, especially with Kentucky Wired. We could definitely do that.
I'd really like to see that, and then your best estimate
Okay.
on total. And then the last question I have, if you'll permit me, Mr. Chairman, do you know, and maybe I should ask Excelicom, is Excelicom providing any last mile service?
Yeah, I'll let Excelicom articulate that.
Okay,
Yeah, I think that they're better served for that.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, why don't we, you said there's a representative here from Excelicom?
Yeah, there are two.
Yeah, if you all could please come on up to the table. And so we can, and if you all could please introduce yourselves for the record.
Yes, I'm Catherine Robertson, and I'm the Director of Business Development for Excelicom.
Okay. Yeah, push the buttons on the microphone.
Oh.
You'll see a green light. No, push. Yeah, try it again. Is it lit? I can't really.
Well,
It is.
it is now.
Yeah, there you go. Say your name again, please.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Catherine Robertson. I'm the Director of Business Development for Excelicom.
Okay.
And Rich Lockhart, the Chief Revenue Officer for
Okay.
Excelicom.
And thank you both for being willing to step forward and speak on this. So to help us to, before other questions, what is just give us an overview of what your purpose is and what you all were contracted to do, and who is your contract with?
Okay, so our contract is with the state of Kentucky. We sell the surplus of the Kentucky wired system. So it's split in half, where they have half the wires, we have half the wires, and we are able to sell those to.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Can we move her a little closer to the mic? I'm having
Oh.
trouble picking her up, so sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, just try that. Then hopefully that's better.
Okay, so we sell the Kentucky wires excess capacity. We sell those to enterprise businesses, ISPs, to help them bring fiber to the residents. We are focused on our last mile. Our last mile service is focused on businesses that can't currently obtain the service that they need to operate properly in their current location, or those who would save substantially by switching to Excelicom's service.
You all do last mile, plus you sell to other entities who will provide last mile?
Yes. So we sell to businesses that have a very high need of connectivity. And then we sell to a local ISP. So we would build out our middle mile in their county, and then they would connect to us and deliver to the residents.
Okay, and is the contract that you all have to do this, is it a certain amount? Is it based on your sales, commission type, or how is that established?
I believe the circuit is the same price for everybody, right?
So, I'm not clear on your question.
Yeah, you all are a new entity to me, so I'm trying to figure out how you all fit into all of this.
Sure. So, again, just to expand, so what our mission is to take the infrastructure that's in place with the Kentucky Wired Network.
Yes.
We're investing additional money of private funds to expand, to construct more fiber out to businesses that have high capacity needs, as Catherine said, and also to expand the network out to very close to neighborhoods that are underserved. And when we expand that facility close to an underserved neighborhood, then we're able to allow an internet service provider to access our lateral that we just invested in and the Kentucky Wired Network, to use that capacity to lower their cost, to incent them to come in and provide service to that underserved neighborhood. That's our mission. That's what we're doing. So we have several agreements with internet service providers where we've invested and expanded the Kentucky Wired Network so they can come in and supply and provide that consumer service. So that's part of the mission. On the business side, what we're doing is we're approaching various businesses in the Kentucky area who primarily have a high cost to use high bandwidth or have poor bandwidth services. And I think there's an example of 3 cases that were used on the tour. You can read about those. And what we're doing is we're using the network to provide a multiple of capacity, let them use much more capacity at a very affordable rate for their business practice and to use cloud applications to run their business more effectively. And I think, like I said, I think there are 3 cases of the tour that you could read in the report of instances where businesses are excited and now being provided a much lower cost basis to operate their business in the state of Kentucky, as well as use a lot more capacity so they can improve their performance and their productivity. And we're promoting this as part of economic development to entice more businesses to come to Kentucky, because now they can have a lower cost, higher speed, secure access to the internet.
Okay. Representative Blanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm hearing you all talk about the last mile. I hear you talk about businesses. Well, what about residential folks? Are you all selling to them?
No, we do not have a residential division.
Okay.
But so our way of servicing residential neighborhoods is to partner with a local ISP so they can tie into our network, so it costs them less to get to the customer. They tie into our network and they can deliver to the resident.
So I understand what you're trying to accomplish, but I also share a concern coming from a rural area in that I have local co-ops that's invested millions upon top of millions of their own monies to reach residential and businesses. But when you come in and you cherry pick the businesses away from them, it's going to leave them with no other alternative than to drive up the cost for residential. And part of the whole purpose of our broadband expansion is to get broadband into rural areas and into homes where people don't have access to them. Mm-hmm. And that's concerning to me. It's concerning that they're cherry picking the higher paid customers leaving the residential customers to the local groups that's already invested all this money. It already began implementing. I've had broadband for a number of years in my home, but they did their own investing. So it concerns me to the impact when you're just targeting the best customers that's going to generate more revenue for your company. I understand as a business model for you all what you're trying to do, but for me, looking out for my constituents as a whole, I'm afraid you're going to drive up the cost for them in the areas in the residential sector.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of confusion about this cherry picking. So we're not going out and picking what businesses.
Yeah, I'm
we
sorry,
want.
we cannot hear you
Oh,
at
I'm
all.
sorry. So we aren't going out and picking what businesses that we want. We're picking the businesses that don't currently have the service that they need, or that the cost is too exorbitant for them to use whatever service it is that they may have. So we're not going out there and, I want Sue's Bakery and Tommy's
Sure, I
Mechanic
get what
Shop.
you're saying.
That's not what we're doing.
Right. Well, what if I come to you as a residential customer and say, you know what, I'm not getting enough. Can you service me? Are you then going to service me as a residential customer?
Oh, no, but we're probably going to find a local ISP there that isn't servicing that area and say, hey, do you want to partner on a project?
And we're lowering the cost of that, because what we'll do is we'll use the infrastructure and we'll expand that infrastructure. If there's a neighborhood or an area that's underserved, what we're trying to do is get as close to there as possible if it's underserved, right? If it's served, then no one really wants to go there. But if it's underserved, what we'll do is we'll expand the infrastructure using our funds, and then allow an internet service provider to come in, and now their cost basis is lower, and they can access our network, and then they'll provide the broadband to the consumer home or the neighborhood that doesn't have good service or has high cost service. So we're enabling consumers who don't have service or have bad service or high cost service today with a lower cost proposition.
Okay, two things, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be finished. One, more of a comment. You talk about neighborhoods. So most people's neighborhoods are going to differ from what I think of in neighborhoods. Okay, you think of a neighborhood of a number of homes, subdivisions we would call them. We have very few subdivisions.
Yeah.
There may be literally 2 miles between houses where I'm at up in East Kentucky. So we don't have that conglomerate of homes where you can target a big broad number of them, which means it takes more broadband to reach out to get to each residential home. So the other question, the last question, could you briefly explain to me when you say you partner with or have agreements with these other companies to provide to those, can you explain to me what that entails, that agreement? What would that look like?
Sure. Do you want your sales? Do you want to give?
Sure.
the agreement right
So the agreement with, and we have several utilities in the state of Kentucky who are using our service. So a traditional internet service provider or utility, to provide internet, they'll need to connect to a national provider traditionally, who's headquartered out of state, that provides them bulk internet. So what we're doing is we have access into the bulk internet through the national interexchanges. So what we'll do is we'll go to a utility in the state of Kentucky who might be an end user, an end provider, or a local internet service provider, a Kentucky-based internet service provider, and we'll provide them access on the core network at a very, very low cost, and then give them bulk access so when they sign up consumers, their internet cost per home is significantly lower. So our contract with the internet service provider is we give them a multiple of access. So they might lease certain amount of bandwidth today at a price, we will double or triple that bandwidth at a lower price because we're able to use the infrastructure in place, and then they can now reach out to the to their and provide services.
Infrastructure in place includes poles that the companies
Kentucky Wired
and you're
will
attaching
utilize
to
the
them.
Kentucky Wired access. Yeah,
And what are you paying them for the use of their poles to run your broadband?
I don't know whatever the utility rates are. I don't know what that would be.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You know, please forgive us. I'm trying to put this part of it together. We know in each of our regions, we have utility companies and other providers that have submitted proposals to the state that have been pending for months and months and months and months. And so we get questions about this every week. And I'm having a hard time understanding how you all ended up with 50% of this when we've got local utilities that are wanting to basically provide the same services that you all are. And this is not a question for you all. This is what I'm perceiving. If you want to correct me in what I'm saying, please do. But and we've got folks waiting for coverage, and we've got utilities with plans in place that are very feasible, but nothing's happening. And I think some of this has to do with holdup of federal funds, if I'm not mistaken. But so I'm trying to pull together how you all ended up getting 50% of this, and everybody else is stuck with the other 50%. Was that a decision made by KIA, Director Williams? Can you contribute to this conversation?
And when you say 50%, do you mean 50% of the Kentucky Wired network? The
Yes.
wholesaling,
Yeah.
the wholesaler
Yes.
agreement? Okay. Well, I mean,
I don't.
I don't know what I'm asking, so I apologize. I'm trying to understand this.
I think that was an agreement laid out based on.
Yeah, I think if you visualize this, what we're utilizing the Kentucky Wired infrastructure is to help utilities. So the utilities are in regional, local areas.
So you
that
would be
wanna
the
build up.
middleman between
Yeah, well,
that
so right now, a utility that provides service today in a local area, they have to access the internet. So they're gonna buy from a national carrier that's headquartered in Dallas, Texas, or New York City. So what we're doing is by utilizing this Kentucky Wired network, we facilitated that same access. So nothing different than what the utility is doing today in Western or Eastern Kentucky. They're supplying that local service. We come in with the middle mile and we partner up. We'll offer up that internet access to that utility so they can lower their cost and they can still provide consumer services. We're not interfering with that whatsoever.
so you're a middleman, but you're also competition in some ways.
We're competing against the national carriers who are charging the utilities a price for internet. The utilities have to use the internet for their subscribers, so they purchase that from a national provider. We're a local provider using a state asset. Now we're coming in and providing these utilities with a lower cost and more bandwidth so that local utility can offer a better cost position for their consumers and hopefully expand to more homes.
No. I'm in
Senator-
the process of doing an audit on our current customers and what service they came from. It is not totally complete, but up to this point, it's over 50% complete, and up to this point, I haven't seen that a single customer that came from a local ISP to us.
Okay.
It's all Spectrum,
Okay.
Charter, AT&T.
And so the idea is the more business that you all can generate and more accounts you all take in, eventually over time, when there is a profit, the state's going to benefit from that.
Yep. And the
Okay.
faster we can grow, the quicker the state will benefit.
Okay. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want a couple of follow-ups on Representative Blanton's questions. I think I want to address this to you, Ms. Robinson, not solely because I think you gave the answer, but you've already proven one of my theories that you have proven to be much more intelligent and articulate than your husband. So I want to kind of roll with that from
Don't
here.
tell him that.
I realize I'm not setting the bar real high, but anyway, I appreciate that part of it. You were talking about how Celicom kind of interrelated with businesses and that sort of thing, and that you kind of cleared up Mr. Representative Blanton's cherry picking question. So you don't provide service to any businesses that were already being served by another internet provider. Is that correct?
Well, no, that's not correct. So let's say you own a business and sorry, I'm not used to being up here.
You got to bring all of us along with you here, you know.
So let's say you own a health department or you work at a health department, and 50% of the time you have to be on your phone's hotspot to be able to get internet access. It's just what's available out there. Well, we would come in and service that location so that they didn't have to do that anymore.
So if they didn't have enough up-down pipe, then you would come in and enhance that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So those would be in areas that obviously didn't already have that available, or the health department in your instance would be using that. But you're also going to partner with local ISPs. So presumably you could partner with the ISP that's already providing that health department the service, but you're going to have a direct contract with the health department, which is a really good financial client of the local ISP. So that's going to hurt their bottom line, which I think is part of Representative Blanton's earlier question. Don't let me put words in your mouth on this. But then the businesses that you supply directly are not going to go to the bottom line of the ISP, so the price that they pay will then be higher for the residential end users that they provide. Unless we're going to suspend some of the laws of economics, as I understand.
But I think what we're neglecting to consider here is that by tying into our account, tying into our backbone, and using our circuits, it's going to reduce their cost significantly of being able to get to those residents.
I get that part of it. Maybe this will help back into part of the answer to my question. You guys also were talking about contracts and ratings set with the local ISPs. Is there a fee schedule set, or is that negotiated on a one-by-one basis?
We're not regulated, so it could be negotiated on a one-by. We do have some for the utility segment in the state of Kentucky. We work with the utilities to determine what's an attractive schedule for them to want to use a local provider than a national carrier out of Texas or New York, and it's an enhanced offering for them. So we have developed a unified program for ISPs and utilities, but we're not regulated. Okay. So it could be modified based upon market conditions. Again, the mission is we're just trying to offer a lot more bandwidth at a lower cost, so these regional local internet providers can have a lower cost basis and expand.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple more follow-up. I would think that I would have been surprised if you said you had uniform pricing, because there's so many areas in our state that are just so diverse. I don't see how you could even have a one-size-fits-all template for pricing. But in that pricing structure for a local co-op or something, some of those local co-ops are going to have more business, more industry that they service than others, just by definition, the way our state sets up. In your pricing, does it work more higher volume, lower price type of structure? Just generally, I don't need to get into the specifics of how you negotiate your business. That's not my intent at all. But we kind of need a framework, because we get asked all these questions, and we don't have any answers. And quite candidly, Celicom and Kentucky Wired have been like the great pumpkin. We've heard about you for years, and we're finally glad to go to the pumpkin patch and see you for a change. I'm glad we're getting to this point.
It's typical in the industry. There's price per bandwidth. So if an internet provider buys a certain level of bandwidth, there's a price with that. If it's 5 times that, there's a different price, so it's variable. So yeah, like we'll have a certain utility that might buy 10 gigabits of capacity, and they'll a uniform price. But if another utility or internet provider buys a gig, which is a lot lower, there's a price associated with
Sure.
it. But it does scale on a basis.
Sure, and the
based on
more you buy at
bandwidth.
a cheaper rate, then the lower your rate are, you can pass on to your
Yeah,
end users.
exactly. Yeah.
So help me fill this hole then. If some of the businesses are high users of bandwidth and you guys are contracting directly with them, then that's not bandwidth that flows through the ISP back to that end user within that ISP's service area. So then the price per gig for the ISP goes up because they don't have those high-end users that you're directly contracting with.
We won't modify our price for the ISP based on that. They can purchase as much or less as they need.
Right, but if the businesses that you contract directly with are in this ISP's service area, then the high bandwidth that they use is not going to be serviced by the ISP. It's going to be serviced by you directly. So that's going to take out the volume.
There's not even a dent with that.
There's not what? I'm sorry?
I don't think there's even a measurement to the amount of bandwidth that we would modify from an ISP in an area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
I mean, a typical business might use 100 meg or 1 gig of service, maybe 100 meg.
Would you like me to address your other two questions about? Would you like me to address your other two questions about the reporting?
Yes, please. And I apologize. I didn't mean to put anybody on the spot. I didn't know who to direct it to. So yes, please do.
No, so we do those reportings. It is completely financial at this point. It's basically letting KCNA know what money they've got coming to them. However, I understand your interest in wanting to know what it is that Excelicom is doing, and if you would like us to include a narrative in a quarterly report on what we've done over the past 3 months, I would be happy to include that.
Yeah, I would think that would all need to, from our purposes, going back to Senator Carroll's point, we get asked this question all the time. Nobody's asked us, hey, what's the state getting back in money? All they ask is, we've heard about this. We know all that money's laying out there. We've heard about all these different things that are coming, but we don't see anything. And I would be more interested in what is being done on rollout more than revenue at this point. So yeah, I would like for all of that to be included in the report.
Sure, we'll be happy to include a narrative in the.
When you do that, can you
reports.
break it down by contracts with ISPs and with businesses directly?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think we'll also include, we're purchasing from ISPs as well, which I think needs to be reported on as well. So
Sure.
we're also in certain areas where there is a municipal provider or a local utility, we're actually paying them for facilities and partnering with local loops in their area as well. And I think that needs to be represented because it's part of the partnering of this. And I think it will shorten up the confusion of competition and probably be a more reference of supporting and partnering.
I think that would help everyone, and I
We'll put
realize
that in
that
there.
this is outside of my arena as a legislator, but I'm still kind of puzzled that we have this entity that's sit for administering and regulating that, but you guys are doing the reporting and are apparently filling out the reports. So maybe we'll go at this one backwards from the way we normally do things. Yeah, the things like those are the things that we need from you guys. Yeah. One, to do our jobs, but two, let the people know what's going on with this. This is really important for a large part of our state.
Yep.
And we're happy to have you involved. We just need to know what's going on with this too.
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember is the dominance of telecom spend in the state of Kentucky are with large international companies, very large international companies. So the relevance of our business is more affecting that than anything.
Absolutely. Most
So-
of my district is going to get to where they need to be through you guys than it has the ones that are supposedly been providing this service, because you're geared to do that and they're geared to not service most of my district.
And local energy co-ops are now going to have an opportunity. And again, we want to support and partner with those. So that's part of the mission. So
And let me stop you for a second. That kind of goes back to Senator Carroll's, or one of his earlier questions. That's kind of what I understand your role is as the middle mile. We talk about things without really understanding what they mean. Is you provided the necessary gap between the big pipe at the source and the sprinkler head for an irrigation system that actually throws the water out into the communities. Is that a fair?
that is
I understand sprinkler systems a lot better than I understand telecom. So, all right, thank you.
Yes, and I have heard everyone's concern about being uninformed about what is going on, and in the very near future, you will all start getting personalized reports based on activity in the areas you represent.
Why haven't the quarterly reports been occurring? That my understanding is that was agreed on in 2017, and there haven't been quarterly reports. Why?
To the best of my knowledge, it was disagreement or trying to work out the type of report that would need to be submitted.
For 4 years?
I've only been here 4 months, so I can only speak for the last 4 months. But that's what I was told, is that there was some confusion about how one entity wanted it versus another entity, and figuring out what all to include in it. But now that is you all. Is there an example of it in their packet, Joel?
In the quarterly report?
Yep.
No, it's not in the packet, but we can get that to you.
Okay.
And there is an example version of the quarterly report.
Of what was agreed on? Okay. Okay, Senator Nemes. I'm sorry, Representative Nemes.
Make sure you don't demote me to the Senate,
Yeah, the younger and better looking Nemes.
and much less articulate. So I just want to have a quick comment, because I don't want the message to come back to the company wrong here from today's proceedings. My friend, the senator, is from a different area of the Commonwealth than I am, and his people talk to him about, we don't want to talk about the cost, we want to talk about coverage. I want you to know that there's a lot of us here where we hear about costs. That's all I hear about. I'm from a different area of Kentucky, but don't take back to the company, cost be damned, let's get coverage, because we're going to continue to bird dog it, and that's all I hear about from my people. So I just want to I know how things get conveyed from committee meetings to company. It should not be conveyed that cost is not an issue. It is the issue in my area.
Yep. That is not what we heard. We
Okay.
understand how
Just wanna be
important
clear.
cost is.
Okay, Senator Thomas.
Mr. Chair, at this point, I'm going to defer my questions. I'm eager to hear. Time is running, and I want to hear from Director Hicks. But I will say I'm very pleased to hear that what you've said over and over again is that you're providing the lowest cost possible to the end user, based upon your competitive rates with the main content providers, which we all know are Spectrum and Charter Communications. I want to add this. Am I correct, though, that because you are the middle miler and not the first miler, that you're able to offer these lower costs because of the expenditures made by the state through the Kentucky network over the past 8 or 9 years? That's the biggest cost, is building that first mile, that infrastructure network, so we can reach places like Graves County or Martin County. Am I correct on that? That saved the end user a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yes.
correct.
Okay, we're going to do one more question for these folks, and then we're going to ask the directors to come up. Representative Beckler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and be succinct. I just want to make sure that I understand. You are providing last mile service directly to businesses for whatever reason, okay? You are not providing last mile services for residential, but you're selling to ISPs. Is that correct? Okay. Could you tell me what your financial arrangement is with KCNA? Are you a subsidiary? What is the financial relationship?
We're not a subsidiary. We're the wholesaler agreement. So the relation.
Contractor? We're contractor?
Yeah, I don't know technically how to answer. I know that we have a wholesaler agreement with KCNA. And I think the wholesaler agreement is a public document that explains the relationship.
Okay. Last question. Could you provide a list of the ISPs with whom you've worked or partnered?
I can send you a list.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Howell, real quickly, please.
Yes, thank you. I just want to follow up on a question that Ms. Robertson had answered for you. Talking about the prior negotiations and what the delay been, do you know who or which agencies Kentucky Wired and Succom had been negotiating with up to that point?
Our parent company, Macquarie Capital.
Okay, but who on this, was that between you and your parent is what was taking so long, or was there was a state entity that was involved in the negotiations that held all that up?
I don't know.
Because presumably now that we have the infrastructure in place, it's taken us 5 years, but we finally gotten it. That those issues, if it's with the state, won't be as difficult. But you don't know. I realize it was way before your time.
But
so.
I can ask and find out and
Yeah,
get back with
would you please?
Yes, I will.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you both for being here. We may have a couple more questions before we get done, so if you all could just return to your seats, and I would ask Director Hicks and Director Williams to please come to the table. And I understand that you all don't have particular presentations to make, just more for questions, or do you have comments that you'd like to make in response to some of the questions you've heard?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for inviting us. Just a couple comments on the report.
Okay, please introduce yourselves for the record.
Yeah,
please.
I'm John Hicks. I'm the State Budget Director.
Sandy Williams, Executive Director, Kentucky Infrastructure Authority.
And so, first, a few comments on the report. The staff did a really good job. This is in a way a historical record of the events that have taken place around the public policy of getting broadband out to as many of Kentuckians as possible. So in that regard, it was it's a well done piece of work. It is it characterized the legislation that you all passed properly, and particularly the one you just passed in the 22 session, House Bill 315. That was an amendment to the original legislation on the Broadband Deployment Fund, but it is one of the most specific pieces of legislation on broadband in the country. And I know that because one of the best practices that Mr. Hopman and his staff says, go look at other states who are doing it. Well, we've done a lot of that. There are a few states that have done that because they put their own money into broadband deployment, state dollars. Right, the Commonwealth of Kentucky has not done that. Right, but the federal government is now getting ready to push a ton of money down to states in order to try to lower the capital cost of internet providers to get to unserved areas of Kentucky. And so as we're now at a nexus point where we're moving forward with the funding that the testimony had earlier, the $300 million, for example, from the American Rescue Plan Act. Of which $89 million has been awarded a few weeks ago to 47 projects covering touches 36 counties. About a good number of those projects had fiscal court funds included in them, showing the community support that is going on in terms of trying to get broadband out to unserved areas. So as it relates to the findings and recommendations, pretty solid. Some of the things that are already required by House Bill 315, such as putting a strategic development plan together for broadband. The federal government's also requiring that to get some of the infrastructure money. So we're gonna kill two birds by creating a strategic plan there. Mapping resources, darn right. We're gonna put a lot of resources into as accurate a map as possible. There is not an accurate map available for the Commonwealth of Kentucky yet on exactly where the unserved areas is. But I will say the first round of funding, that $89 million I mentioned, illuminated certain areas that were unserved. They applied for the funds, they showed they were unserved, and they were awarded. So that helped close the gap in certain areas about that. So talking about regulation and policy, the National Telecommunications Information Administration is going to is responsible for the $42.5 billion that the infrastructure bill has appropriated to states and territories for broadband. And so we talk with them monthly at a minimum because there are certain elements that we have to walk through in order to get that. The FCC is going to be working on a better map that is going to, as your staff has said, is going to determine how much is Kentucky going to get out of that $42.5 billion. Well, we've got estimates that outside entities have done. So this isn't a certainty, but saying Kentucky could get at least $700 million out of that infrastructure bill, and we'll wait and see exactly how much it is. Combined with the $300 million from the ARPA funds already appropriated, $1 billion to deploy broadband. Now, in House Bill 315, where are we going to first? You've set the priorities. Places where there are no service, not unserved, no served. Then places where they're unserved. And let's see how far that money goes then before we get to underserved. Right, underserved is people who already have internet access, and it's 25 meg or below. So anyway, so you all have already put in the policy priorities of where we're going to put all this money, and so a couple things have got to happen. We've got 3 pots of federal dollars we're using: the ARPA funds, the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund, and the infrastructure bill, all of which were illuminated in the testimony today. So the recommendations on, go look at what everybody else is doing and try to do try to pick off the best things they're doing. We've done that. We're working on that. The infrastructure bill requires a 5-year action plan before that money will flow. So they're gonna so we're gonna get a planning grant next in order to create a 5-year action plan. Well, that 5-year action plan is going to align with our strategic plan and with that is required by House Bill 315. So we're gonna collect all these requirements together, the requirements you've put in House Bill 315, the requirements the federal government has put into this money, and we're gonna combine those efforts, and in order to get this done so that the funds can flow. So I want to say that House Bill 315 puts us on a path, tells us what to do with the federal funds that are coming down. We had a discussion. U.S. Department of Treasury is administering the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund, the $182 million, the next pot of money we've got. When we talked to them after you all passed House Bill 315, we were talking about the grant plan that has to be submitted. I told them about that priority setting, the no served, the unserved. Their eyes brightened, because that was like right down their alley. That's exactly what they wanted to hear state talk about. This is how they're going to invest their money. And so they were very positive about how the relationship of the priorities in House Bill 315 are going to fit with Kentucky's grant plan, so we can get that $182 million and move forward with another application round and awards. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop. I know that this report has been in the works for a while. So anyway, the staff did a good job. We interacted with Mr. Hoppin and his staff as they were working on it, and so it's part of the launching pad that we're at right now in terms of moving forward with with another the rest of that $1 billion that we're going to start deploying over the next several years.
Do you have anything you want to add?
No, thank you.
Okay. And I think I finally got all of this clear in my head on how this is. So the money has started coming down, the federal dollars, where some of these projects that have been proposed in the various counties, those are being approved. And I'm from what you're saying, they had to meet certain criteria for federal dollars each project. So the question is, who? I understand they have to go through the entity we just spoke with to implement the project.
No, sir. No. Let me clarify that.
Okay.
The Kentucky Wired project and Excelicom's work in wholesaling the excess fiber is a separate matter, right? It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what I just said. So what we've created there is a middle mile infrastructure that's serving ourselves, state government, and our post-secondary education institutions. So that we built it for ourselves. We built it enough so we have excess capacity so that Excelicom could go and lower the capital cost of ISPs, as they described, to be able to connect other unserved areas. So let me just set that aside. We now have an asset in Kentucky, as they've been describing, that is available for those purposes. Now, stop over here to the federal dollars that are flowing downhill. Those are going to go to internet service providers, whether it be municipalities, co-ops, telephone co-ops, electric co-ops, or private sector ISPs. That's where we're going to put our money. Now, some of those ISPs in rural areas may be able to take advantage of the Kentucky Wired middle mile because instead of going to the other guy who may be further away for that middle mile pipe or infrastructure, they've got to connect to somebody's, right, in order to get the internet and bandwidth to get to the last mile. So Kentucky's in a position where we have an opportunity where ISPs can choose which middle mile vendor they're going to connect with. And so in the meantime, we're using it for ourselves. And so we think that is good, public policy to say we've got excess fiber here from a middle mile infrastructure, come see us. Because if you're having trouble getting access to the middle mile, it's too far away, or it's too expensive, it's an open access middle mile. Any comer can join up. So we don't have exclusivity with that middle mile. But Mr. Chairman, I wanted to kind of help set the stage for the relationships.
I appreciate that. That did help. The projects that are proposed, though, does KIA review those from each local entity?
The Broadband Deployment Fund first round application is almost 99% complete. Yes, there was a grant application. There were receipt of applications. There was information on where they were going. There was a challenge process, as the statute requires. There was the adjudication of the challenge process, and we got into then there was a scoring criteria, and we got into the awards that the governor announced a couple of weeks ago. We're in the process of finalizing the grant agreement terms and conditions that we will then present and give to all of the awardees, to consummate and to sign on the dotted line. And at that point, they can start their construction, they can start their implementation, and money can start flowing to reimburse them for the expenses for which they've been awarded.
Okay, very good. Representative Blanton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few quick questions, because you're unbelievable of the knowledge that you're able to retain without having to have all these notes and things on numbers and figures. So see if you can help me out here. First of all, maybe I'm confused about the entire Kentucky Wired and the purpose of the project on the unserved and underserved, but priority on unserved. I always thought that was to reach these peoples in areas that, like you said, are unserved. And I'm thinking residential in my mind, but it seems that most things are focused on business. Was it supposed to be focused on business primarily, or was it supposed to be on residential, or a combination thereof?
Thank you for the question. I'd say a combination thereof, because the idea here was to have an open access middle mile network that other providers can make arrangements to utilize. Whether they utilize it to end up with a home, or whether with a business is up to the internet provider. And so that's why it's available for whatever purpose that an internet provider wants to use it for.
Okay, very good. Now, on to some figures, numbers. Kentucky Wired, how much today have we invested as a total in Kentucky Wired as a state and this whole project?
I don't have that with me. I came here to respond to the report, so I wasn't prepared.
Ballpark?
I'll get back to you on that.
Okay. Then the next question along with that, how much has the state been out, whether it's through state dollars or federal dollars we've been able to use for the Kentucky Wired project, and fines and penalties since the beginning of this process?
I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
Well, my understanding was that we were paying some penalties for from the get-go of the contract on Kentucky Wired. How much is the state out in taxpayer dollars on those penalties since the beginning of this project until today's date?
Yeah, I don't know that.
Could you get us
But
that
I can
information,
get that for
please?
you. Yeah, and I believe another report that came out of this committee or its predecessor, Program Review and Oversight Committee, did a really deep job of looking at that. So,
Okay, I wasn't on that committee, so, okay. Thank you, that's all I have. Thank you.
Representative Nemus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Hicks. I don't fully understand all this, and I'm not making any accusations against anybody. I just want to make sure I get this right. So the company that's providing the wholesaler, that has the wholesaler contract, their job is to get from point 2 to point 3, point 3 being the final, the people who are actually going to, they don't do the first mile, what I'm trying to say. So they do the middle mile, and then they're supposed to sell it to the ISP or whoever that is to finish it, to bring it home. Kind of like I know a lot about the liquor world. You've got the wholesaler in the liquor world. The wholesaler doesn't compete against the retailer. The wholesaler sells to the retailer, and the retailer sells the product to the customer. Okay, that's issue number one. If that's wrong, tell me where I'm wrong there. Number two, they're not doing this out of benevolence, but neither is the state. We get a benefit, hopefully, and they get a benefit. We have set up an apparatus where they get to benefit from all the money, the hundreds of millions of dollars, I think, certainly tens of millions, that the Kentucky taxpayers put into this system. Their business, their private business, I have no problems with that. It's capitalism. They're making money based off of the good work that they're doing and off of the infrastructure that the taxpayers paid for. That's point number two. Point number three, we have retailers, ISP providers, co-ops that have been established, paid for by local taxpayers, paid for by ratepayers, private contracts, public contracts. And that is a good thing for the government entity that hooks up to that ISP's product. It's a good thing for the businesses that hook up to the ISP's product. And it's also a good thing for the person at this house who hooks up to the ISP product. But we also know, that's point number three, we also know, especially in our telecom world, where we required Mom and Pa Bell to have service to everybody and not just the big boys, not just the guys they're going to make money from. And the concept there was, we're going to let you have a benefit, a monopoly in those situations. But in order for you to get the monopoly, you have to provide it to the least among us. To the people who might, you're going to have to pay a lot more money to get a wire to their house than you're going to get. So that's the trade-off. I feel there's some significant unfairnesses here. I don't know that. I'm just trying to tease this out in my mind. I'm a boy from Louisville. This doesn't really affect us that much other than we help pay for it just like all the other taxpayers in the state. But it feels to me that there's something grossly unfair about giving any wholesaler, and this is not against this company. I know nothing about this company, very little anyway. It doesn't feel right to me that we're giving them not a monopoly, but certainly a first place on the pedestal. That they get to benefit from all the good things, and they do a lot of good things as well, but they get to benefit from all the great things that we've done, taxpayer funding and so forth, and the unique position that we have put them in. Then they're going and they're picking off, seems to me, they're picking off the people who can pay. Now, they're not going to say that. They're going to say businesses only. We know why they're doing that. I mean, let's not be foolish. They're doing it because businesses can pay. And that may be okay. But it feels to me like it's not fair. It's not fair to the local provider. Where am I wrong here? And so here's the issue. What happens when the local provider can't make it? Because he doesn't have enough people that he can provide services to that can pay the rates that they need to pay. On the other hand, they're going to say, well, we're providing better services. Okay, better access, bigger broadband, all the good stuff. Want our hospitals and our universities and everybody to be on the better product. But it seems to me that the system was to put them in the place where they provide the better product to the retailer, to the ISP provider. So where am I wrong when my mind goes, and I don't know if I'm right, don't know, but where is my mind wrong when I feel unfairness? When I feel like they're preying upon, I don't want to say that in a negative word, but when, and they're capitalists, that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to do best for their shareholders. But how am I wrong when I think this is unfair? And in the end, unfairness could hurt the Kentucky homeowner. Help me understand that, John.
Well, let me focus on the first kind of public policy idea of the excess fiber was to sell to the ISPs, was to make available middle mile infrastructure the Commonwealth invested in to lower their cost of acquiring the network so that they can then perhaps be commercially feasible to get to unserved areas, right? So that was one of the intentions of why we didn't just build for ourselves, why we built the pipe a little bigger.
So the wholesaler gets the liquor to the retail.
No, that's a good analogy.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was now as to the individual, straight to straight from Accelicom to off the Kentucky Wired network to an individual subscriber, or a customer, those questions are probably case by case. In some cases we have market failure, right? The only reason we're here sitting and talking about it is exactly what you just described for the universal service requirement for telephones, right? And electricity. We don't have that for broadband, right? I mean, we didn't choose to do that as a nation or as a state. And so here, the $1 billion that I'm talking about, that's where we're going to try to close that gap. We're trying to give providers lower cost of capital so they could make it commercially feasible to hit the last home in the county, right? That's what we're all hoping to happen, not just in Kentucky, but nationwide now with the infrastructure bill.
Right.
So that, and to the extent that some of those can take advantage of the Kentucky Wire network, great.
But John, doesn't allowing them to sell to the persons who can definitely pay for it harm our interest to get it to the person in the hollers where they wouldn't otherwise get it?
It depends on that's the but-for question, right? But-for, was an internet provider going to do that, right? Is it there now? Was it there before? I don't know the answer to those questions.
They're going to be run out of business, so they won't be able to do it.
Well, I don't know that this volume of those individual arrangements are such a large enough to have accommodated, right, the bottom line ability of a provider to hit those areas who they haven't hit yet, right? In most cases, that's where I'm coming from, the unserved.
And we hired these folks to help us hit them, right?
We hired these folks to lower the cost of capital providing broadband to places, that don't get it, that don't have it.
And so my fear is, and I'm not interested in whether this company makes $1 billion or $1. I don't care, as long as they're providing fair services and service and getting to our interest, which is to provide broadband to our people. Then that's what we want, within a good cost and so forth and so on. But they don't have an interest to do that. I mean, we know how the world works. We know how companies work. Their interest is to do what they need to do to perform their contractual obligations and maximize profit for the shareholders. Nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly moral. That's perfectly appropriate. But the interest in the co-op, that man goes to church with those folks. His interest is getting it out into the hollers, making sure that he has the best services for the businesses, because he wants his kids to stay in the community. He wants to have good jobs, and he wants to have good homes in his community. The interests are different. And so I think by allowing this wholesaler, and tell me where I'm wrong, please, by allowing the middleman, the wholesaler, to become the wholesaler and the retailer, I think it harms the interest of the legislature. I think it may not totally curtail the opportunity to get there, but it harms our interests, and it competes with the folks who have the same interest that we have in a way that seems unfair. I'm teasing this out in my mind. I could be completely wrong, but it just seems to me that the wholesaler ought to be the wholesaler and not the wholesaler and the retailer. That's my thoughts. And I'm sure I'm going to hear from the company. Tell me why I'm wrong, and I hope I do. Thank you.
Okay. We're going to have to move on. We're out of time for this topic. One final question. I'm on privileges of the chair, and just a yes or no. With all the money that's coming down, the total $1 billion, do we feel like that's going to speed up the state's ability to return a profit on this? I think we were looking at 2032. 2032, they said we would get our cost sharing. Cost sharing. Will that expedite lessen that time with all the federal and state investments coming in to broadband if providers are purchasing from these folks?
I think the potential for yes is there.
Okay. All right. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it. And members of the committee, we will have more conversations on this before the interim's over. I'm sure this is topic that's not going anywhere. So thank you all, and appreciate your help and you being here and the information. Next time we'll try to be more specific on so you all can be better prepared. It's been a while since I've discussed this topic, so I'm having to get caught up again in my mind, and we've moved to a different phase now, so I'm having to understand that. But thank you all for being here. All right, we're going to spend some time now, and looking at the membership on this committee, I see some interest. Those that live in West Kentucky with the tornado funds, if you're like me, I'm starting to get calls of unmet needs within the region, and so started asking some questions about the funds and what is there, what's money been spent for, and so I wanted to get an update on that, and we arranged for DJ Wasson, the Chief of Staff with the Public Protection Cabinet, to be here to to give an update, and Director Hicks is also going to help us out here. And so what we really just want to understand from my perspective, and some of you others, please jump in, is where are we? What have we spent funds on? Have the terms of legislation we passed in the session, those accounts been set up? Are they being spent? Money being spent on the correct purposes, and where are we now? Please introduce yourself for the record. DJ, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I'm DJ Wasson, and I am the Chief of Staff at the Public Protection Cabinet.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Public Protection Cabinet is...
I'm sorry.
Yes?
I'll get you rigged up for presenter mode just there.
There you go. Thank you. The Public Protection Cabinet is charged with administering the Team Western Kentucky Tornado Relief Fund. So this is the fund of private donations that were donated to help individuals impacted by the tornadoes from December 10th and 11th in 2021. So we received donations from all over the nation. We had celebrities, we had corporations, we had people doing bake sales that just wanted to send in $5, $10 checks to us. So on the screen there, you'll see we've received just under $52 million. These numbers are as of July 6th. I will tell you donations continue to come in, so these change weekly, but just under $52 million from 150,205 people. Those funds can be used in summary to help those residents that were impacted by the tornado with food, clothing, shelter, household needs, necessities of life. They cannot be used for administrative costs, but there is an emergency regulation, 800 KAR 1020, that gives more detail about that process. That reg has been through Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee and recently through the Interim Joint Committee on Veterans, Military Affairs, and Public Protection. To distribute the funds, we wanted to provide a very simple, streamlined process for individuals to get that money. We, quite honestly, in speaking with people, we knew that they were focused immediately, on immediate needs right after the tornado. They didn't have access to internet most times. Some people didn't have access to their documentation. So for those initial disbursements, there was not an application process. We used other verified sources to identify individuals and issue assistance payments to them. We also recognized that there were a lot of charitable organizations, a lot of volunteers that really wanted to provide assistance with some short-term needs. So we did focus on longer-term needs when we paid out our funding. So far, we have issued payments on 3 programs. The first being funeral assistance payments. We worked with the coroners, we worked with the Office of Vital Statistics and the funeral homes to identify those that lost their lives as a result of the storm, and we issued payment to the families. Those payments were $10,000 per deceased individual, and all 81 of those payments have been issued. Next, we focused on uninsured homeowners and renters. So for that program, we worked with FEMA to identify those uninsured homeowners and renters that had received assistance from FEMA for home repair, home replacement, other essential needs. We did not want to duplicate benefits that FEMA had already provided, so we worked with FEMA, and on a weekly basis, they provided us with a listing of the awards that they had made, and we issued an additional 20% of that award directly to those individuals with a minimum payment of $500. So those payments started going out in weekly batches the first week of February. And we have received the last reports from FEMA on a weekly basis, but certainly if there are individuals who believe they were eligible, we can handle those case by case. So the third program was our insured homeowners and renters. And for that program, we worked with the insurance companies to gather their claims data for paid claims as a result of the tornado under their homeowners policies. We also recognize that that was a snapshot in time, so we've been working with local case managers to identify people whose information wasn't in that data call with the insurers. And those payments are made at the amount of the deductible that applied to that claim, with a maximum payment of $2,500. Those are still being sent out. We do send those out in batches. We started sending those the last week of February. And I believe we still have roughly 115 payments to be made there. So you can see there on the screen the number of payments that have gone out and the total amounts that have been issued so far. So we also have 3 programs where we have committed funding from the fund. These are programs where people submitted proposals to our agency for funding needs. The first is $16 million that has been committed in response to proposals received from 3 nonprofit entities, Habitat for Humanity, Fuller Center for Housing, and Homes and Hope for Kentucky. And they requested funding to help build 300 homes within the impacted area. So in for this program, individuals would apply through those nonprofits. They would go through their application process, determine eligibility, then submit a request for individual funding to our agency, and we'd verify that those individuals had been impacted by the storm or Kentucky residents, those types of things, and then we issue a check for those individuals. So for Habitat and Fuller Center, that funding is used as a down payment on a mortgage. That is their model, and for Homes and Hope, it is used for building supplies. So those houses are currently being built. I know I was there. They dedicated 3 homes on June 10th in Graves County. That was Homes and Hope, just an amazing day. I know there's a building blitz in Warren County in July, at the end of July, and Homes and Hope also, I believe, has 15 other homes that they're working on right now. So those homes are being built. We actually just received the first request for funding last week for those homes, so we'll be beginning payouts in that program. The next program we've committed funding for is the Graves County Grain Assistance Program. The local judge executive and some local farmers approached us about funding. The grain elevator in that area was destroyed by the tornado. So those farmers, in addition to multiple other challenges, are having to transport their grain elsewhere, which results in larger vehicles needed, just further mileage, and they asked for some assistance. So there is an online application for this program. We've received about 115 applications so far, and the intent is to pay roughly 50 cents per net bushel that was sold to Mayfield Grain Company in 2021. So that is how that program is working. We're reviewing those applications this week, so payments should start being seen within the next week. And the final program, this was just recently announced, is $12 million working with the long-term recovery groups. Those are those local groups that have formed in the communities. They did submit, 11 of those long-term recovery groups submitted proposals to our agency to address those unmet needs. So we've provided some funding for homes, but sometimes people don't have appliances, they don't have furniture. Vehicles are another area that we've heard a lot about. So for those types of essentials for living, we have allocated a total of $12 million. Each long-term recovery group within their proposal provided us information with the number of individuals with unmet needs in their community, and so there will be an allocation to each long-term recovery group for that funding. So we met with them earlier this week. The long-term recovery groups were working on some process details, and so then we'll be able to start that process, which will be that, in general, that people would apply for that funding for their unmet needs through the long-term recovery group. They would work on their case management process, apply their other resources they have available, and if there is still a need, then they can apply for that remainder of that funding from the Tornado Relief Fund. So that's where we are right now, and we know that these needs are going to be going on for a long time. Just being in the Mayfield area, it's just, I don't think the pictures do it justice. There is just a lot of work to be done still. So there is still funding available. We are still accepting proposals for that funding. The last thing I would like to share is just our email. We do know that you all have constituents who have said, for example, I think I'm eligible for one of these programs. I didn't get payment. Where can I go? This is the email address that many of us monitor, and wanted to make sure you had that. With that, I am going to pause and happy to answer any questions.
Okay. DJ, thank you. Can we talk a little bit about the homes that are being built? And I've heard in my district, from Marshall in particular, that they're waiting for funding to start. I think that's Habitat.
It's Fuller Center, and I have spoken with them just this week. So yes, when they get us their request for funding, that money will start flowing. There were some paperwork to get registered, and I think an EFT set up, and so we're definitely working on that. I will say we had heard some questions about how to access. I did reach out to all the mayors, all the county judge executives with contact information, so hopefully that will start some discussions flowing and some funding flowing as well.
Okay. And of the $51 million that's in the Tornado Relief Fund,
yes,
how much of that has been promised or just hasn't been paid yet?
So the amount on the disbursement sheet, and I'll have to total that up, 10.8 roughly, has been paid out specifically. The amount on the committed funding is what has been promised in addition to that.
And what is all that total?
41, thank you.
And so what will happen with the remaining funds?
Again, we're still accepting
Needs
proposals.
coming in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And with the long-term recovery groups, and I know those are set up in each county.
Yes.
What is the function? Are they just more of an advisory type entity to relay what the needs are?
They do relay what the needs are. They also connect people to resources. So when people come to them with unmet needs, they know this grant's available here, or this entity's providing appliances, or things of that nature. They connect people to resources.
Okay, and then one final question I have. Underinsured homeowners, what are we doing to address that?
So really that underinsured homeowners was, so two things that we're doing to address that. One was that we were hoping that some of the payments that went to insured homeowners and renters would provide assistance with that. They'd already gotten their insurance amount. We paid additional on top of that. Also, that is an issue we see a lot through these long-term recovery groups. I got my insurance payment in. I got this additional payment. Costs have gone up. I still need some additional funding. So that some of that $12 million we have pledged to those long-term recovery groups can assist with that.
And I understand that through the formula that you all are using, there has been a limit put on that per family or per homeowner?
There has, and that's one of the details we're still discussing, whether that we need to increase that limit per family. That's one of the details we're talking with the long-term recovery groups.
And I'm sure you all get this, but and I'm not making any judgments on anybody for anything, but this is just a reality of some of the comments that I get. You have some folks that maybe could have afforded homeowners insurance that chose not to pay it.
Yes.
They got a new home free.
Yes.
And then you've got folks that paid their insurance, but because of prices and being underinsured, they're going to be out a lot of money. They're not going to recover all of that.
It's a challenge, sir. Yes, it is. And that's, again, why we're it's why we paid insured homeowners and renters funding initially, and why we're trying to help with some of these unmet needs to try to ease some of that equity. So,
Will you all look at expanding what you might offer these folks if out of this remaining $10 million?
I think that's something we can take a look at and discuss, certainly.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Senator Thomas.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I was just doing the math to make sure you got an accurate answer to your question. What Ms. Watson indicated was that $10.8 million has already been spent. She's got committed funds for $31.25 million, which comes to $42.05 million. She's indicated there's $51.95 million that we've raised so far. So if you do the math, the committee should know that there's still $9.9 million of unallocated funds. That's the answer.
Okay, I was a little bit off. Senator Howe.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just want to comment that was the best example of math by an attorney that I've seen up here since I've been up here. Senator Thomas is way ahead of me on this. Ma'am, I just wanted to thank you I've got 4 of the counties in my district were hit by this tornado. I just wanted to, on everybody's behalf, we appreciate all that you've done up to this point. I know it's been hard. You've been creating some of this framework and everything as you go on the fly when there's so many needs coming at you from all these different directions. So we just want to I want to tell you how much we appreciate all that you've done up to this point and all that you'll continue to do as we continue to work through this. My question goes into the grain issue. You said it was 50 cents per net bushel for the 2021 crop. That's what was being stored there that will be in some level unrecoverable. Is there anything that's being done to address the 2022 crop? and I hope that you have this magic answer for everyone too in the process of this. But what has been the discussion on that part of it?
So the assistance payments are to help with the additional costs in 2022. We needed to base that on something and something verifiable.
Okay.
So what we did was use the delivery to Mayfield Grain Company in 2021 as the basis for calculating the assistance payments that are being sent. We'll also get documentation about 2022 to make sure that those farms are still in business, and comparable, recognizing the hot weather, the challenges with the terrain, all of those other things. So we'll be certainly understanding that. But so the assistance payments is to help with 2022.
And from an accounting standpoint, will those bushels be documented by delivery slips and tickets for the granaries and where they take them?
Exactly.
How are we going to do this for some that maybe use on-site storage for some of their grain?
On site, on their own, at their farm. Well, so
Yes, ma'am.
again, the eligibility is if you used the Mayfield. The issue is the Mayfield grain elevator is no longer in service.
Right, but some of the farmers are just going to be putting this in temporary storage on bags on their farms because they're just not going to be able to haul it.
You mean for
all at
2022?
Yes, ma'am.
So if they delivered it in 2021, that's what the assistance payment is based on.
Okay. So it's on that basis. then.
Correct.
When will those funds be distributed?
We've started reviewing applications this week. Again, we've got about 115, although they keep coming in. And so we sitting, quite honestly, down tomorrow and hopefully start issuing checks next week.
Great. Thanks for clearing some of that
Certainly.
up.
DJ, can you talk a little bit about, there were funds created all over this state, radio stations, the chamber. Are you all able to help coordinate any of that to keep duplication of efforts? And how are we, fraud in all of this is a big concern. It's, millions and millions, and there was such a rush to get this out and to get assistance. And, we worry about that kind of stuff. And I do understand that from the perspective of some of these funds are going to be going directly to homeowners or individuals rather than to service contractors that, and I worry about what if they don't pay their bill and, all of, and that's, and I'm sure you're all getting hit every day with stuff like this. So can you just kind of speak in general about those issues?
I can. On the other funds that were not donated into our tornado relief fund, but the chamber funds, all of those, we do have a weekly coordination meeting with local case managers. And they are trained to not, to avoid duplication to the best of their ability. A lot of that, though, is reported by the individuals. Did you receive funds from, and so we work with Kentucky Emergency Management's case managers. We've a lot of entities like UMCOR, Catholic Charities, United Way also serve as local case managers, and we do try to our best. The best way we know how in that coordination is to have communication, and we do try to communicate on a very regular basis to ensure there's no duplication, or that people know various sources where funding can come from. But it is difficult, as you noted, with people and funds, multiple funds. So on the fraud, certainly an issue that we've been sensitive to. It's why the disbursements that have already been made have been using verified sources. So that's why we used FEMA and their case management to identify the uninsured homeowners and renters. It's why we verified through the insurance companies, who also have fraud detection within their companies, that there was a valid claim for the tornado, and the amount of that claim and the amount of the deductible. So that is how we have tried best to address the fraud aspect, getting information from the individuals, but verifying it through another independent source. And so, I'm sorry, on money going directly to individuals, also a challenge. For example, the funeral payments were, while they were made out to individuals, were sent to the funeral homes to address when the expenses were settled. On the homes for Habitat, for example, that money's being mailed to Habitat to be applied when the mortgage is signed. So we've tried to put processes in place to address those and put controls in place to address those concerns. Ultimately, we do have to have a little bit element of trust, but we've tried to put those controls in place.
Director Hicks, as far as reporting, how detailed are the reports going to be on where these funds have gone, and with either one of you, each individual expenditure? Or will we get like a complete report for every penny that's been allocated from the legislature and from these donation funds? Can we access reports on those to kind of keep track on where the money's going and what it's going for?
Well, let me speak to the $200 million that the General Assembly appropriated to what is known as the SAFE Fund, and so we're required on a monthly basis to report to Interim Joint Committee on Appropriations and Revenue. The Department of Education, who got $30 million, they report, and then my office reports on the remainder. But with the legislation, there was also like $9 million that went to University of Kentucky for the Princeton facility. That was damaged, destroyed by the tornado. So we have provided on a monthly basis, particularly the funds that went to the Department of Military Affairs through emergency management, and we have, I guess, an example of a spreadsheet right here that we send is like which city, which county, which public or nonprofit utility, how much, and what for. The Department of the Division of Emergency Management is managing the agreements with those recipients. And so what we were reporting are the awards, and that they're the ones that are going to control the disbursements of the funds. So we're watching. So we're watching every dollar and reporting on a monthly basis. What is the activity?
Has the SAFE Fund itself been established, or are you all using other methods or processes to get those funds out?
Yes, I mean, in the accounting system, we established the funds in the accounting system as you appropriated them. All right, so you created a safe fund, but then you dealt the cards out to multiple players. All right, so we look at the combination of those locations as the safe fund, because we have to work through the appropriation process and through the accounting structure. So we have I've communicated to your staff, exactly where all of that 200 million rests, if you will, in the accounting system, and we report against that combined amount.
And DJ, what are, at the phase that we're at right now, what are you all seeing as the most significant needs? I know in my county, FEMA has said there's still like 5.5 million in unmet needs at this point. What from what you all are seeing, what are those needs?
Quite honestly, the primary need is housing
Still.
repair. That's what we hear the most of. And then certain essential things within your home. People lost everything. Some people just simply lost everything. So housing, permanent housing is still the need, or repairs to, new homes or repairs to existing structures are the primary need we're still hearing.
Okay. And one more question and I'll stop. Have we lost quorum? Yeah. Mr. Co-Chair, can you wait just a minute, please? I would like to entertain a motion to approve the report on the broadband. Do I have a motion? There's a second. Got a second? Somebody second? Okay. All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Oh, is it a roll call? I'm sorry. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator McGarvey, Senator Nemes, Senator Schroeder, Senator Storm, Senator Thomas, Senator Wise, Representative Blanton,
Aye.
Representative Fleming, Representative Hatton, Representative Jenkins, Representative Riley, Representative Sharp,
Aye.
Vice Chair Howell,
Aye.
Vice Chair Beckler,
Aye.
Co-Chair Carroll,
Aye.
and Co-Chair Nemes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, it is approved. I appreciate you. You can go now. Thank you. One final question. Is the Department of Insurance, are you all working with them? Are you aware of their activities as homeowners deal with their insurance companies to ensure that they're being treated fairly?
Certainly, that's an agency within our cabinet. We deal with them. We work with them quite a bit, again, even to verify valid claims to issue payments, but then to also address complaints of, I don't think that this claim settlement was enough because of inflated costs, those types of things, or I haven't heard from my company. But what I would say is overall, we've heard that the insurers have been responsive. We understand that there are additional costs. We understand sometimes there's confusion about exactly what was covered and what wasn't, and we're happy to work through those complaints, and we do coordinate with them.
Okay, very good. I appreciate all your efforts, and I criticize the executive branch a lot, more particular the head of the executive branch, but there sure are some good people that work in the executive branch, and two of them right here. And thank you all for all that you do and the work that you put in. And I'm sure you're about at your wits' end, both of you, by now with all of this. And for the folks in Western Kentucky, thank you. And I don't know what we would have done without all the help, and we are very grateful. I would like at some point maybe the West Kentucky caucus, if you could come and if we could arrange that, because I'm sure there are a lot more questions as we move into latter phases, so we understand what's going on from you all's perspective, because it's just different questions that we're getting, and I don't get a lot of calls where people are just completely frustrated. The one that I did get, you all had already taken care of it, so I appreciate that. But there are some, and I'm starting to pick up that there seems to be more maybe discontent that things aren't moving as quickly as they should. But but the enormity of this, I'm sure it's going to just take some time. So the better we understand what you all are doing, the better we can help, make our constituents feel a little bit more comfortable that the help is coming. We just have to get through these processes.
Certainly, and we appreciate your support as well of this fund and everything we're doing. I know Representative Dossett, for example, we've worked quite closely with him on these issues, and I think it's going to take all of us working together, and we all have the same goal, is to help these people. So thank you very much.
Director Hicks, would you like to add anything? I'll give you the last word.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a long day.
Okay, I understand. Members that are still here, thank you. We were going to get into talking about the topics that staff will be studying. What we did this time is we took a list. I selected 2, co-chair selected 2. We're still in that process. Right now, the only one that I'm certain of is a study on child protective services as it relates to foster care and getting into some of those issues. And I know co-chair is looking at some also. And then leadership is looking at another proposal for the Senate. And I have not heard back from them. So hopefully by the next meeting, we can announce what those topics will be, and so staff can move forward with those studies. There are no other items to be addressed before the committee. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. We stand adjourned.